Thank you very much, Bonnie. It's an honor to be receiving an introduction from you. What the federal government has done to this young woman and to her husband is absolutely atrocious. And it's nice to be here at PorcFest to share my perspectives on this case with you. I've been speaking at PorcFest now for many, many years. In fact, my biggest beef with PorcFest is that I keep scheduling it when it rains. And I wish I would schedule it when there's going to be better weather. And last year it was raining, and last year when I was giving the talk here was what motivated me to look into Ian Freeman's case. And I was standing there in the back, and somebody mentioned Freeman's case, and I turned to my friend Jim Babb. Some of you, if not all of you, know Jim. He's a real friend of the state. That's sarcastic. And I said, what do you make of this Ian Freeman case? Because you see, I had heard about Freeman getting convicted when it happened. And I'm in the libertarian movement now. I've been 35 years with the Future of Freedom Foundation, which I founded. But what a lot of libertarians don't know is that before I did this, I was a lawyer, a litigator, civil and criminal trials in South Texas. I tried cases in state court, federal court. I was licensed to practice in the appellate court, Fifth Circuit. In the U.S. Supreme Court, I was licensed to practice there. My very first trial right out of law school was in federal court, where the federal judge appointed me to represent an indigent charge in a cocaine case that the DA had set this guy up. And I showed the jury they had set him up, and the jury came back with a not guilty verdict. My very first case in federal court, jury. And so I know that they go after and target innocent people. But when I heard about Ian's conviction, I looked at it in the internet. He had been convicted of fraud by a jury. And I thought, okay, I believe in the jury system. I know juries make mistakes, but I think the jury system is the greatest criminal justice system in history. Because unlike judges and tribunals, juries really do conscientiously try to do the right thing. That's my experience. They make mistakes, but they really do try to do the right thing. And that's all you can ask. So, as libertarians, we have the non-aggression principle, no initiation of force or fraud. So, okay, a jury convicted of Ian of fraud, and I said, okay, that's it. I don't need to look at this case anymore. So I'm standing there in the back of this pavilion room, and I turned to Jim, and I said, what do you make of this Ian Freeman case? And he says, it's a crock. It's just a bunch of bull. And I said, really, why? And he says, it's just a bunch of bull. And I said, and I have the utmost regard for Jim Babb, and I said, oh, okay. So I went back home, and I started going through the internet. And you'll notice if you Googled Ian Freeman case, article after article in the mainstream press, fraudster. He got convicted of fraud. Until I finally get to, and I keep going. I just keep going, and I find an article by Brian Doherty from Reason Magazine, libertarian, that's critical of the verdict. First one that's critical of the verdict and the sentence. And I have the utmost respect for Doherty's scholarship and accuracy, so this intrigued me. So I contacted Jim and I said, can you get me a transcript of the trial? Now, a transcript is a verbatim account of the trial. The testimony, the arguments, the jury verdict, everything, just verbatim. Jim digs it up. It's online. So he sends me the links. I read this thing from the beginning to the end, all the way to the jury verdict. And I am absolutely stunned as a lawyer, because this man is an innocent man of all the charges he's been convicted of. He's been sentenced to 8 years in a federal prison, and I get to the end of this thing, and I said, there's no way. This man is totally innocent based on this transcript. So I end up writing this 3-part article, The Unjust Conviction of an Innocent Man, and that's why I'm here today, to share with you that the federal government has convicted and sentenced an innocent man that is now serving time and separated him from this woman here, preventing them from starting a family when I'm sure that's what they would love to be doing. Okay, There are 4 essential crimes that Ian got convicted of. And I'm going to share with you why we're dealing with an innocent man here. One is failing to register as a Bitcoin seller. Okay? Now, you can search the Constitution all you want, and I guarantee you, you will not find a power of the federal government to require people to register their businesses. Okay? But that's what they got. I mean, it's essentially a regulatory violation. And so that's one thing, that failing to register and conspiring to fail to register. Essentially the same thing, though. Regulatory violation. Second, income tax violation. They got him on failing to pay income taxes for certain years. Okay, so that's the second crime he got convicted of. The third one's the substantive count. That's the money laundering count. They charged him with money laundering. And then the fourth one is a conspiracy to launder money. Now, you may think that's the same thing as laundering money, but it's not. It's a totally different crime. They prove totally different things on a conspiracy count. And I'll explain that in a minute. But let's go to the substantive count here, the money laundering count. That's the big one. That's the one he got an 8-year prison sentence on. What is money laundering? Well, what's going on here is that you've got a drug war that they've been waging. The feds have been waging, as you all know, for, at least the 1920s when they went after Billie Holiday. It's always been a bigoted drug war. The blacks always received disproportionately higher jail sentences. But they've been waging this war for decades and decades. You know, when I first started practicing law in South Texas, I was handling drug cases. And there were federal judges there. Oh, man, we got to crack down in the war on drugs. Same nonsense that they're doing now. And there was one federal judge in San Antonio called Maximum John, because he always gave maximum drug sentences on drug cases. And the DEA, or same nonsense you see today, because it's a perpetual program. It keeps these federal judges and these federal prosecutors and DEA agents in nice salaried positions. A lot of these guys could never make it in the private practice of law. But they get these government salaries, and the drug war provides them a nice little income. And it's a never-ending thing. So in the process of trying to win this war, they destroyed financial privacy, because they couldn't win it with all their police state measures, asset forfeiture, high jail sentences and stuff. So they said, well, if we start assaulting people's financial privacy, boy, we'll be able to catch all the drug lords. And that's how the banks become spies for the federal government. The know your customer nonsense, that if you deposit $10,000, they have to report on you to the feds. And if you structure it with $1,000 a day for 11 days, they report you for trying to avoid the $10,000 limit. Or there used to be $1,000 bills, but they knocked those out because that would make it harder for the drug lords to hide their stacks of $100 bills and so forth. And so they've essentially destroyed financial privacy. And this is where the money laundering statutes came in, that, boy, we're making it illegal to turn drug war money into clean money, launder the dirty money and coming out with clean money. So they enacted things like the money transmission law, that anybody that transmits money has got to register with the feds and so forth. So Ian Freeman, okay, who's Ian Freeman? Well, Freeman's a libertarian, okay, like all of us here, but he's even more than libertarian. He's a radical libertarian. In fact, I think we would say that Ian Freeman is an extreme radical libertarian, and okay, and very smart guy, very successful, host of Free Talk Live. I mean, they had me on Free Talk Live, 20 years ago. Fantastic program. But the statists hate this kind of thing. They hate the radical libertarians, what we would call the enemies of the state. The statists don't understand that, including the federal judges and the IRS and the DEA and the federal prosecutors. They've all gone to their universities and their law schools with statist professors, and they've been inculcated from their public schools with a statist mindset. They don't understand people like us. To them, we are like threats to national security. So they look at somebody like Ian and say, oh man, this is a guy that, boy, we got to watch. And so what Ian does is that this guy, Satoshi Nakamoto, comes up with Bitcoin. And the whole idea of Bitcoin, as you all know, is to restore some sense of financial privacy to people's lives, where the government's not keeping track of what you're doing with your financial affairs. Well, this is anathema to the status. I mean, how are they going to catch drug dealers if they're not monitoring what everybody's doing with their money? And now it's gotten to the point where they just feel they have the prerogative that as serfs, your financial affairs are open to the government. They just have the power to do this because they're in control. Bitcoin comes along and says, hey, here's a way you can hide your affairs. Well, that's like a threat to national security. I mean, my gosh, the whole nation could fall apart if people have financial privacy. Well, Ian immediately recognizes what's going on here. Now, this is when Bitcoin's at like zero. It's not a money-making thing for Ian. He sees immediately that this is a way for people to protect their financial privacy. So he becomes one of the pioneers right here in New Hampshire, in Keene, New Hampshire. He becomes one of the pioneers of educating people and promoting Bitcoin, not to make money. Nobody was even thinking about making money at that time, but as a way to protect your financial privacy. This is how committed this guy is to a free society. And so he starts selling Bitcoin. He's educating people here in New Hampshire on Bitcoin. He goes into stores in Keene and sets up kiosks, like vending machines, Bitcoin kiosks. He may be the first person in the United States who did that. I don't know. But he certainly was one of the first. So he talks to the store owner and says, can I put the kiosk there? Well, yeah, I'm sure the store owner didn't know what the heck a Bitcoin was. And so people could go and buy Bitcoins. It was unmanned. It was like a vending machine. And young people would go in there and put in $10 and buy a Bitcoin. And Ian inadvertently made a lot of people a lot of money if they held on to their Bitcoins. Because as you all know, it just soared in value. And so people were just going there and buying these Bitcoins. Well, that attracts the attention of the feds. Okay, this guy is now a real threat. Because number one, he's an extreme radical libertarian. He's promoting libertarianism and anti-statism on Free Talk Live. And he's promoting and selling Bitcoin, which they see as a real threat to their system. So they start spying on him. And they start monitoring him secretly. So they assign an IRS agent. Okay, standard stuff. If you can't get anybody on a crime, you send the IRS. You remember that's what they did with Al Capone. They couldn't get Capone on his distribution business of alcohol and other related crimes, so standard, let's go after him on tax violations. So they send an IRS agent to spy on an American citizen. Now here's your fraud. If you want, now, okay, what's an element of fraud in the law? It's a misrepresentation of a material fact designed usually to get people's money. Okay, if you want to see fraud, we got it right here now. Because what this guy does, this IRS agent, he tells Ian that he's a car dealer. He's a liar. He's misrepresenting who he is. There's your fraud. It's government fraud. And he befriends Ian. Says he's a libertarian or libertarian-oriented. Starts going to libertarian events. His name was Pavel Prolosky. And he says, man, I'm sympathetic to libertarianism. They go to social events. And he starts buying Bitcoins. Okay? So, and Ian's making money off the commission of Bitcoin. So this guy's using U.S. taxpayer money to buy Bitcoins. But to ingratiate himself and show that, boy, he's one of us. And so after a year, by design, this guy Prolotsky's at a social event, libertarian event, and within earshot of Ian, he says to somebody else that he's a drug dealer. And he wants Ian to hear it. And Ian does hear it. Well, Ian's not a dumb guy. And Ian turns to the guy and says, I just overheard what you just said. And you have just terminated any further purchases of Bitcoin from me because I'm not going to sell you any more Bitcoin. What this guy does is horrific. It's just dirty, dirty stuff. He says, wait a minute. I've pulled together some very wealthy friends that are ready to buy a lot more Bitcoins. Now, this guy had already bought, thousands of dollars worth of Bitcoins from Ian, but he says, I got friends. So he's trying to tempt him. I mean, classic entrapment. Dirty stuff. I've got friends that are ready to buy thousands of more dollars from you, wealthy friends. Ian says, ain't going to happen. I'm not going to sell Bitcoin to you because I know now that you are a drug dealer. Now, Ian's got no problems selling to drug dealers. None of us do, You go into Walmart and Walmart guy says, yeah, I'm a drug dealer. Walmart guy's not going to say, I'm not going to sell you the hammer, okay, because you're a drug dealer. But Ian knows what's going on here, that the money laundering risk here of selling to a drug dealer, he's laundering dirty money. He's helping that drug dealer launder his money. So I'm not going to sell to you. So this guy Perlowski says, well, I can go buy some drugs, Ian, from the kiosk. He's trying to get Ian to say, oh, yeah, that'd be fine because I'm not there. They're unmanned kiosks. They're vending machines. Ian says, no, you don't have authority to use those kiosks. You don't have my permission. So guess what this guy does? He goes to an unmanned kiosk, puts in $19,000 of U.S. taxpayer money, buys Bitcoin, goes to the U.S. Attorney's Office right here in New Hampshire, tells them what he's done. They secure an indictment for money laundering because Ian has sold Bitcoin to a drug dealer. And that's the money laundering count. That's what he got convicted of on the substantive count. Now, as all of you know, the jury verdict is final in a jury trial. The jury has the power to decide both the legitimacy of the facts themselves, what are the facts, but the legitimacy of the law too. They have the power to judge the law and the facts. If they don't like the law, they can acquit. Now, judges will lie about this. Federal judges especially, they will always lie to the jury that you don't have the power to judge the law. It's a lie, and they know it's a lie. The jury does have the power to judge the law. And if they acquit somebody because they don't like the law, there's nothing that federal judge can do about it. He can't put them in jail. He can't overturn that jury verdict. The jury verdict is final. That's one of the beautiful, beautiful aspects of our jury system, both at the state and the federal level. But, so the jury verdict here finding Ian guilty is final, with one exception. If there is no evidence whatsoever to support a finding of guilt, the judge has the power and the duty to throw it out. Okay? But if there's just a little tiny bit of evidence to support the charge, the judge can't touch it. The verdict of guilty stands. So it has to be no evidence at all. Judge Joseph LaPlante, the federal judge, to his credit, realizes that this is an innocent man on this charge and realizes there is no evidence of guilt at all. And there wasn't. When I read this transcript, I said, this is an innocent man. And Judge LaPlante recognized that. And he throws this out in the legal parlance called a judgment of acquittal notwithstanding the verdict. So the verdict is guilty, but there's no evidence that the jury used. The jury just made a mistake. Okay? And so the judge throws this out. The substantive charge of money laundering, he throws out. That's gone now. Now, let's go to the conspiracy to launder money. Different charge. The conspiracy, they have to prove an agreement. They don't have to prove money laundering. They have to prove that Ian entered into an agreement with somebody else to launder money. All they have to do is prove the agreement. And then one overt act to further the conspiracy. But the main thing is the agreement. So I'm reading this transcript. And at the end of this thing, I said, where's the agreement? Where's the evidence of an agreement? Now, what they did here was they introduced a massive amount of evidence of fraud. And this deals with what I called in my series of articles, which I would invite you to read at the website of the Future of Freedom Foundation, fff.org. The series is called The Unjust Conviction of an Innocent Man, the Ian Freeman case. What I'm convinced they did was when they raided Ian's house to arrest him, or to search his house, which is a very violent raid, did ugly stuff. I mean, these are all nonviolent crimes, regulatory violations, income tax, money laundering, nonviolent crimes. It was an ugly, violent raid. People could have been killed or whatever, damaged. But they searched his computer, and I suspect this is where they found the Lonely Hearts Club victims. These were women, and a few men too, but in their 70s or 80s, they were lonely, they had lost their husbands, and they fell in love on the internet. Okay, but they were looking for love in all the wrong places. And they found their love on the internet, and very handsome man that fell in love with them, and they never met him in person, of course. And then what the lover would say is, like, I need a temporary loan here. I'm in bad trouble. And the woman would say, oh, I'm so much in love. And she wouldn't tell her children because, she didn't want her children to know that she had fallen in love again. And so she would go to the bank and withdraw $100,000 or have $100,000 of her savings wired to Ian, because the lover would say, okay, I need the $100,000, but let's do it with Bitcoin. Instead of wiring to my bank account, I want you to buy Bitcoin and then put the Bitcoin in my wallet, in my name. And so the woman is starstruck because she's in love, and so she does this. And so now the bank would try to dissuade this type of thing. They have their know your customer stuff, and they would examine, but the women would say, oh, no, this is all legitimate, and they didn't want the bank to know because the bank might block them. And so Ian had his own know your customer regulations. He didn't follow the federal regulations, of course, but he wanted to protect his own customers from getting defrauded. So he would make them sign a questionnaire. Are you sure your money's going to this purpose that you think it is? So the women would lie to Ian. Because Ian's business depended on feedback on the internet, like Amazon Books or something, and so he wanted good feedback. So he would try to ferret this stuff out. But inevitably, the women, they were in love, you see. They didn't want anybody interfering with their love affair here. So they would buy the Bitcoin, and then tell Ian, don't put the Bitcoin in my name, put it in their lover's name. And so, of course, as soon as it hits their lover's name, it's gone. They never see it again. So the feds come in and say, well, Ian's responsible for this under the conspiracy to launder money. Now, you might be wondering, well, wait a minute, what does the Lonely Hearts Club, defrauding them, have to do with a conspiracy to launder money? And it's a good question because it has nothing to do with it. Keep in mind here, Ian's not charged with defrauding these women. The feds have not charged him with that. I'm reading this transcript saying, where's the indictment for fraud here? There is no charge. I gave you the 4 things he was charged with. Okay? None of them are defrauding these women. There's no conspiracy to defraud these women. This testimony should never have even come in. There's an evidentiary rule in federal court that says evidence has to be relevant. And even if it's relevant, it can be excluded if it's highly prejudicial. And this meets the classic example of this. This was highly prejudicial. The jury was transfixed. The judge, Judge LaPlante, was obviously transfixed with this evidence. At the sentencing, the probation office, they said, Judge, you can't use this money to give restitution to the Lonely Hearts Club because they found a Bitcoin in Freeman's computer that's worth about $5 million, and they confiscated it. And the judge wants to give restitution, wants the money to give restitution to these Lonely Hearts Club victims to make them whole for the money they lost. And the probation office says, Your Honor, you can't do that. This is a conspiracy charge. In a conspiracy, there is no victim. There's no fraud here. There's no fraud charge here. There's fraud, but Ian's not convicted of fraud. Okay? So judge says, oh, no, I've got to restore, I mean, this is terrible that these women lost this money, and it is terrible. But that doesn't mean Ian's responsible for it. But the jury is clearly prejudiced by this. I mean, you can imagine all these women are getting on the stand and crying. They've lost their life savings and all this. So terribly prejudicial. Should never have come in. Has nothing to do with the agreement. So the question is, who did Ian enter into this agreement with? I'm reading this transcript. As a lawyer, I'm saying, I need evidence of that agreement. Okay, the prosecutors admitted in a pretrial motion that he never conspired with the scammers. No agreement with the scammers at all. They agreed with that, and it was true. Ian never agreed with the scammers to do anything wrong. Okay? He just put the money in their name at the instructions of the Lonely Hearts Club people. So even with money laundering, you're taking dirty money and turning it into clean money. The money that's coming from the women, from the bank, they never indicted the bank. The bank essentially did everything that Ian did. They let her have the money. It's clean money. It remains clean money all the way up to the point that it lands in the name of the scammer. That moment, it becomes dirty. Okay? So where is the agreement to launder money here? Oh, well, he's obviously not agreeing with the victim to launder money. That's ridiculous. So the only possibility is that the agreement is with his fellow colleagues. He had friends that were also selling bitcoins. They were all selling bitcoins together. But selling bitcoins is not laundering money. There's a lot of people who sell bitcoins. They're not laundering money. So the agreement to sell bitcoins does not equal a conspiracy to launder money. And there's certainly no evidence that Ian got together with his friends and said, hey, let's enter into an agreement to launder money. There's no such thing. And so that's why there is no evidence on this at all. Now let's look at the other two charges, the registration charge. When the money transmission law is enacted in 1970, requiring people that transmit funds and to register with the federal government, Bitcoin is not invented yet. Okay, now they're saying if you're transmitting money or funds, you got to register with the federal government. Okay, at some point, Bitcoin is invented. Did Congress intend to cover Bitcoin? We don't know, because obviously Bitcoin wasn't invented yet. Now, the government's position at the Court of Appeals hearing, and I was at that hearing. Some of you joined us. We had a little event at a pub nearby. I drove up here to the Court of Appeals hearing. I was very interested in what the arguments were going to be. And the government's lawyer was, well, Webster's dictionary defines Bitcoin as money. And I'm sitting there saying, oh, we're going to be putting people in jail now for what Webster's dictionary decides? I mean, and when? When does Bitcoin become money? When the Webster's dictionary people are editing their latest publication, the dictionary? And if you look at the internet, ChatGPT even, or you look at Forbes magazine, there's a recent Forbes magazine article where a guy, a financial expert, says, no, Bitcoin doesn't meet the prerequisites of what we consider money. And he explains why. And there's any number of articles that take the same position. ChatGPT says, no, it doesn't meet the qualifications for money. But if Webster's dictionary says it, then boy, we got to put people in jail for that. It's incredible. But at what point, when Nakamoto announces Bitcoin, is it money on that day? How can it be? Nobody has even heard of it. How about the second day and the third day and the fourth day? We don't know when it becomes money. And are we really going to convict people and put them in jail when we don't know what Congress would have done? I mean, isn't it incumbent on Congress to clarify that this is their intent instead of simply here guessing and jumping to conclusions based on Webster's dictionary? We're going to put people in jail on a regulatory violation. He got 5 years. This is what Judge LaPlante gave him, 5 years for this regulatory violation. To put things in perspective, there was a case recently I think it was in Florida, with a movement of black socialists, predominantly black. There's some whites in the organization, but it's called the Uhuru movement. And they're dyed-in-the-wool socialists, but they're very good on foreign policy. I mean, they oppose the interventionism and the imperialism and the national security state. They don't buy into all this anti-Russia hostility. In fact, they were working with Russia because of their commonality of interests in terms of opposing U.S. interventionism. So they were going to Russia, and the feds just hated them, targeted them, just like they did with Ian, because, if the feds say Russia's our official enemy, that's supposed to be our official enemy. I mean, we knew this from the Cold War. The Russians were coming, and now we're supposed to hate the Russians, and we're supposed to hate the Iranians, and we're supposed to hate everybody that's the official enemy, China and so forth. Well, the Uhuru movement said, to heck with that. We don't hate Russia. And they were appearing on RT and stuff. So they indicted them for failing to register as Russian agents. Okay? And so they fought it, and the jury comes back in with a not guilty verdict on the registration, but interestingly enough and weirdly enough, they find him guilty on conspiracy to fail to register, which made no sense. And they're appealing it. But the judge there said, he should have just thrown it out, the conspiracy thing, but instead he says, I'm going to, I know this is about freedom of speech. He says, that's what this case is about. I'm going to give probation. And it was the right thing. He gave him probation. They're appealing the conviction anyway. I think they'll get it overturned on appeal. But he did the right thing. This is a regulatory violation, probation. Judge LaPlante gives Freeman 5 years for the same type of regulatory violation. So I look at this and I say, you don't convict people in this country by guessing at what Congress' intent was. Congress wants to make sure that Bitcoin is covered, then you make clarifying legislation. And that's why I believe he's innocent on this charge. On the income tax charge, it's clear Ian had not paid income taxes, okay? But the IRS agent, a separate IRS agent, takes a stand. She's a woman, and she's there testifying about, the data and the statistics and whatever on income tax. And the defense lawyer did a very good job on cross-examination. He says, Isn't your custom to call people in and discuss what their income is and what their deductions are? And she says, oh, yeah, that's our custom. That's what we always do. Did you do that with Ian? No, we didn't do it with Ian. Okay, so there you already see that they're targeting this guy. It's not equal treatment under law. They're targeting him. And oh, by the way, if they'd had enough on income tax violation and registration, if they really felt that was enough, do you think they would have resorted to the Pavlovsky fraud? Never in a million years. They knew they didn't have anything, which is why they resorted to that entrapment fraud. That didn't work. So in any event, the IRS agent, the defense lawyer says, well, then you don't really know whether he owes any income taxes or not, do you? And she says on the witness stand, no, we really don't know if he owes any income taxes. Bam, right there, the case is over on that charge. Right there, when I read that, I said, that's it. The judge should have just immediately dismissed the charge. If that's not reasonable doubt, I don't know what is reasonable doubt. It's case closed. Not guilty on that charge, but the judge lets it go to the jury, guilty. All right? So this is where the case stands on appeal. Now, what's going to happen on appeal? Well, I'll be real honest with you, and Bonnie knows this. I am not optimistic, okay? And the appeal was heard in February. I told the group there, I said, I think they'll have an opinion within 2 months. It's been about 5 months now. I don't understand the delay. There's an old adage, justice delayed is justice denied, but I don't know, maybe they have a backlog there or something with drug cases or whatever. But I'm not optimistic because His lawyer, Ian's lawyer, on his appellate brief, did not challenge the conspiracy count. He challenged the income tax charge, the registration charge, and did not challenge the 8-year sentence, the longest count. And I'm sitting there reading this brief, and I'm saying, oh my gosh, I wrote Ian. I said, do you realize you have not challenged the conspiracy count? That's your 8-year jail sentence. And Ian said no, and so he checks with the lawyer, and the lawyer says, well, I was up against a word count limit. The Court of Appeals has a word count limit on briefs, appellate briefs, and I ran out of time. I ran out of space. What? Okay, there's solutions to this. You compress your arguments. If you've run out of room, you revise. They teach you in law school how to write simple sentences. It's one of the things they teach you in law school. So you compress, you edit, you revise, so you get all your arguments in on all the counts. You don't just say, I've run out of words here and leave the 8-year jail sentence count there. And I'm looking at this and saying, oh my gosh. Now, he does have a strong argument. This is the argument the lawyer's using, that since the judge threw out the money laundering count, and rightly so, no evidence, and they might throw out the registration or the income tax charge, there's a spillover argument that the jury should not have heard that evidence, and that spilled over into the conspiracy count, prejudiced the jury, and so the judges should remand for a new trial. And it's called the spillover argument. It's a heavy burden, but it's a powerful argument. I think it's a persuasive argument, and that's what we're hoping for, that they buy this spillover argument. But there's another thing the lawyer could have done, and that is revise his brief so that he puts the conspiracy count first and addresses that and said, okay, now what was his ground for challenging the conspiracy count? No evidence. The same ground the Judge LaPlante had thrown out the money laundering count, that there's no evidence to support a conspiracy. Okay, so then you challenge that first, and if you run out of words, well, at least you're running out of words on the lesser counts, like 5 years. 5 years is better than 8 years. But there's one final solution, and that is you just simply file a motion with the Court of Appeals asking for more words. And they have the discretion to do that, and I think they would have done that in this case. It's a complicated case. It deals with a new thing called Bitcoin. You file a motion saying, I need 20 more pages. Okay? And then you add the other thing, and so, but you don't leave a count intact. Now there's another rule in the judicial system that if the Court of Appeals decides on its own motion that there is no evidence to support a conviction, they have the authority to rule that way, even though the lawyer has not raised it. And that's what they should do. They should, when they read this transcript, they're going to see there's no evidence to support this thing. Now, but some jurisdictions say, well, no, if you don't raise it, you waive it. But my conviction is that it is the duty of a court that if they know that there is no evidence to support a conviction, it is their solemn duty, even if the lawyer did not raise it, to say we cannot sustain a conviction when we know there is no evidence. And that's what they should do, is throw this whole thing out. Will they do that? I'm not optimistic, because at the Court of Appeals hearing, one of the judges asked the prosecutor that if we knock out one of these charges, don't you feel we need to send it back to the judge for reconsideration of sentencing? That's not an optimistic thing. It's what you want to send it back on. What your ideal is to don't send it back at all, reverse and rendition, throw the whole thing out. But that's not going to happen here. The best we can hope for is a new trial. But that to me would be a big victory, because Ian should never have been even tried in the first place. I think a second retrial. Now, I should say that they had a brilliant team of lawyers. Some of you may not realize this, but not all lawyers are created equal. And they had 3 lawyers against 1. They were really after Ian Freeman. And one of them was a brilliant, brilliant lawyer. So brilliant that he's an assistant U.S. attorney. After the Ian Freeman conviction, he got appointed to the Federal Court of Appeals. He jumped over all the federal district judges, elevated to the First Circuit Court of Appeals here. Incredible achievement. And the guy was brilliant. I read his jury argument. I didn't hear it, but I read it, and I said, oh my gosh. This is one of the best jury arguments I've ever seen. And I don't think Ian's lawyer was up to the match. And this guy was just brilliant. And so what's going to happen on appeal? Well, we're all hoping for the best I think we can hope for is a reversal and retrial. And I think Ian would beat him in a new trial. They might even try him again. Hopefully, with the changeover in the administrations, they've cleaned house there. I should mention, let me mention this. Okay, are you wondering why all those newspaper articles on the internet say fraud? Got sentenced for fraud, convicted of fraud. Why I didn't want to look at the case anymore because he had been convicted of fraud? Guess where that stems from? Immediately after sentencing, the U.S. Attorney's Office here in New Hampshire sends out a press release saying that he was sentenced for money laundering, which he wasn't because the money laundering charge had gotten knocked out by Judge LaPlante, and they knew that before sentencing when they issued this press release. It was a lie, straight out lie. They sent it to the newspapers, and then they didn't say he had been convicted of fraud, but they called him a fraudster in there. And that's where it all stemmed from all these newspaper articles in the mainstream press that he had been convicted of fraud through this misleading, fraudulent press release. And I should also mention that the chief judge, district judge, federal judge in this area of New Hampshire issued a public reprimand of the U.S. Attorney's Office for a lawyer in their office twice failing to disclose exculpatory evidence in a case to the accused. That exculpatory evidence is evidence that points to innocence, and he kept that hidden twice. And they reprimanded him. So after the first time, they should have fired him, because what he's doing is he's saying a conviction is more important than the possibility that an innocent man go free. You don't want prosecutors like that. But they did, and it was a rare, you never see this, where a federal judge is reprimanding a prosecutorial's office. So hopefully they cleaned it out in the change of administrations, but I don't know. So I think Ian would have a good shot, though, with that change. So that's where this case stands now. Now, why did I want to come and give this talk to you? Well, one reason is because I want people to be aware of what they've done. You see, this is dirty stuff. They've convicted an innocent man, and if people believe he's guilty, they get away with it. But if they know that the conscience of the community, we know what you did to this man. We know that he's innocent. He's serving 8 years. We know he should be home with his wife. There's just something feels good about that. That they get away with their dirty stuff, but they know that we know the truth. And that's why I keep writing articles about this case, and that's why I wanted to bring it to you so that you would have a perfect understanding of what happened here, the unjust conviction of an innocent man. There's also one other route, and that's the route of pardon, presidential pardon, and that's what that sign there is for. You can do the QR code, and you can go to a website that it's an Ian Freeman website where you sign a petition calling for his pardon. And as we all know, the president is talking in terms of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, and if this case can get to his attention, there's a good possibility that Ian could be released far before the 8-year jail sentence that he's received. Totally unjust sentence. On that, I'll wrap it up and see if y'all have any questions. You want to go to the mic?
I was wondering if you were aware and could address the background of how long the federal government was going after Ian, because this goes back way back before any indictment or charges here. They were investigating him for over a decade, I believe, and did a lot of dirty tricks before this even came up.
Okay, he's saying, am I aware of all the dirty tricks and investigation and spying on Ian before this? No, I'm not. I didn't know that was going on. It doesn't surprise me. So this is sort of like the culmination, and it explains a lot that they were never able to get him, obviously, on all the stuff they were investigating him for before, and they finally said, oh, now we got him, gotcha. And it's dirty, just absolute dirty stuff. Yes, sir.
Two easy questions. One is, if it does go back to trial, would it only be on that conspiracy count?
Okay. The question is, if it goes back to trial, is it only on the conspiracy count? Well, it depends on what they knock out. If the Court of Appeals knocks out the income tax thing, then yeah, that's gone. So if the registration, yeah, it's gone. If they say, well, we're going to remand for the conspiracy, then it'll only be on the conspiracy, because they can't bring him on the money laundering charge under grounds of double jeopardy. That's gone. So it really depends on what the Court of Appeals rules, but that's the best we can hope for. Probably go back for that one. Possibly the Court of Appeals could say we're going to remand on the registration charge. We want the district court to reconsider some points here, blah, blah, blah. Really depends on what they do. It's theoretically possible he could be remanded all three counts. Not clear.
Okay, and the other thing, we probably all know in our community that federal government plays all sorts of dirty tricks in federal court, which is why most people don't even try to go there. Can you say anything about the jury in this case? I mean, were they just completely befuddled by the other side, or do you think maybe they just see him as a bad person?
Yeah, that's a great question. What about the jury here? How come the jury went along with this? Well, for one thing, you had all this Lonely Hearts Club stuff. And then you had a team of three experienced prosecutors. You had one defense attorney. And to me, it was like a steamroller as I'm reading this transcript with these high-powered lawyers, including this brilliant lawyer that gets appointed to a federal appellate court, that I think they just steamrollered the jury into these convictions. That sometimes you get a climate of real power in a federal court. You walk into a federal court, you know it's not like a state court. You can feel the power there. And I think some people get intimidated and awed with the federal prosecutors and the federal judge, and if they get the sense that the judge is with the federal prosecutors, they defer to authority. And therefore you need, in my opinion, what Ian needed was a team of criminal defense lawyers, high-powered criminal defense lawyers that was going to take the offensive and put the government on trial. That's what I would have done. I would have put the government on trial in this thing and taken the offensive and told the jury, this is what they're doing to your free society here. You convict this guy, you're empowering them to destroy you. And I didn't see that anywhere in the trial. It was always play defense, play defense, play defense, and I think the jury just got overwhelmed. That's just my opinion, you know? Yeah.
Hi, I am proud to have supported the Future of Freedom Foundation since very nearly the beginning, I think. I was a little dismayed to hear that you had respect for the same person that the government had respect for, meaning the prosecutor that you described as brilliant and writing a brilliant brief, and then apparently the government respects him because he got promotion or he jumped over a couple levels. My experience with the judicial system seems to be that the prosecutors want a conviction whether the person is guilty or not, and the defense wants an acquittal. And the hope is that somehow you're going to arrive at justice, although there's certainly no guarantee of that. So, do you think that the guy wrote the brilliant brief deserves to be where he is, or did he get it because he convicted an honest man?
Okay, that's a fascinating question. Okay, first of all, he's saying that he's been a supporter of Future Freedom Foundation since the inception, and thank you. I mean, you guys have kept us going for 35 years at FFF, and I invite anybody else to, become a donor to our work. We're small, but our mission has always been to present a principled, uncompromising case for libertarianism, and we would welcome your support, and thank you for your support. He's asking about this lawyer that I'm not praising this lawyer, okay? I don't respect this lawyer. What I'm saying, he's a brilliant lawyer. There are brilliant lawyers that do bad things. And when I read his jury argument, I said, this is one smart guy. But I don't respect him because he's participating in the prosecution of what I consider was an innocent man. I don't think any prosecutor should do that. And he did that. Now, was he elevated to the Court of Appeals because of the Ian Freeman prosecution? Possibly. He posted it on his resume that he was real proud of this. The U.S. attorney, she has it. She secured the conviction of a Bitcoin seller or something like that. Was that why he was elevated? I don't know, but I know that the guy's a smart guy. But this is a prosecutorial's office that I don't think deserves any respect at all. And the chief judge is there saying that. They let this guy stay on, this lawyer, he wasn't one of the three, I don't think, that was not delivering exculpatory evidence. I think that reflects on all of them. This fraudulent press release, if I had to guess, it was submitted to all three lawyers that participated in the prosecution. They let that fraudulent press release get by if they did review it. They knew that he had not been sentenced for money laundering. That had been thrown out. They knew that he had not been convicted of fraud. They used all this evidence at trial of the Lonely Hearts Club when it was totally irrelevant. I think all this is improper stuff, so don't get the impression that I'm praising or respecting this guy. I'm just telling you, he's a smart guy. He's a smart lawyer. He's a good lawyer.
Well,
he's just being used for bad ends.
Thank you for that. I'm relieved to know you don't respect him.
No. There's a lot of smart lawyers that I can tell you are very brilliant that are
evil.
Evil and do evil things. In other words, their talents are being used in the wrong way. Same way with these DEA agents. When I was a young lawyer, I knew a lot of these DEA agents. I was representing drug defendants and stuff. They were guys in their late 20s, early 30s. They were good guys. And we got to kind of be friends, and they were smart guys, very dedicated, but doing very evil, immoral stuff, with this drug war.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the great support.
Did I understand correctly? You said you weren't fully aware of the history of everything leading up to the Fed involvement with Ian and everything?
That's correct. I had no understanding of that.
So I guess this isn't a question. I'll just tell you some of the stuff that was going on. So Ian Freeman, he moved up here almost 20 years ago as part of, he brought his radio show up here, Free Talk Live, and he founded this liberty organization, sort of this loose coalition called Free Keene. Definitely take a look at their website, freekeene.com. He got involved in doing a whole bunch of different activism out in the city of Keene, poked the bear on a whole bunch of different stuff, went to court against the city on a whole bunch of nonsense charges. It all started from him having a couch outdoors and them trying to fine him for that. It just grew from there. He helped organize these marijuana smokeouts in public because we were trying to legalize marijuana. And we actually had the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force coming up to New Hampshire investigating these guys. And some of the same FBI agents that were involved in this case were involved back then. They went after another activist who went by the name Rich Paul. At the time, he got convicted, thrown in jail for a while. This was a whole massive conspiracy by the federal government to go after somebody that had organized a very visible, very large part of the Free State Project Liberty Movement here.
I'm really glad you're bringing this to my attention because it explains everything.
Take a look at one other thing that it's hilarious, but it's sort of tragic at the same time. They organized this thing that they called Robin Hooding, where they would basically just walk around the city and put money in the parking meters to deprive the city of fine money. The city of Keene sued them over this, lost, sued them at a higher level, lost, took it to the state Supreme Court and lost. That made international media, Reuters and the BBC covered the city making asses of themselves. So it is absolutely the case that this was a massive government conspiracy to try to take out somebody that was making the government look like the fools they are.
Yeah, now I did know about the parking meter thing, which I found very humorous that they were following the meter maids around and putting money in the cars before she got there to give a ticket, and So here's Ian poking the bear for all these years, but they can't get him on anything. So it does explain. I didn't realize that they were harassing him all those years, but they couldn't get him on anything. So it now makes sense that they finally set him up on this Pavlov-Pulaski thing, fraud, and say, we got him, we got him. And it was a totally fraudulent charge.
Absolutely. It was a railroading from the beginning. 'Cause
Railroad from the beginning. Now, this explains a lot. Now, I can better understand. I thought it was all Bitcoin related.
Just
but-
take a look at freekeen.com. It goes back
Okay.
like 2008 or so. There's articles
Awesome.
on there. So
Thank you for bringing it to my attention. I can't hear you. Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Okay, we got 2 minutes.
This is 1 second. I just want to bring to your attention, you Google Ian Freeman Bitcoin, and the very first hit you get is IRS press release from 2023 that reads, Ian Freeman sentenced to 8 years in prison for operating a Bitcoin money laundering scheme. And that's live today on the IRS website. Is that accurate?
No, he got acquitted of money laundering. That's what I'm saying. It's a straight lie. These people lie. They're the ones committing fraud with Pulaski and stuff. It's just dirty. It's dirty stuff. Now, I'm surprised they don't have there about his fraud, too, because in the press release issued by the U.S. Attorney's Office, they called him a fraudster, some FBI agent, I think, there, and they include that in the press release. He wasn't convicted of fraud. He wasn't charged with fraud at the trial. Yeah.
One very quick question. What is conducive to the career of a prosecutor?
Well, I can't hear you.
What is conducive to the career of a prosecutor? Is it good practice of law or successful convictions?
Well, they measure their success, unfortunately, many prosecutors, by their conviction rate. But the good prosecutor will not use that. A good prosecutor cannot prosecute somebody in good faith that he thinks is innocent. He can't, that's his obligation. He has to prosecute somebody that he honestly believes is guilty. But your bad prosecutors, they're just putting notches on their belt. This is why this guy won't turn over the exculpatory evidence, because he wants that notch on his belt. Doesn't look good if that guy gets acquitted. That's rotten prosecutorial work. The good prosecutor is the one that conscientiously is looking at a case and says, this guy really is guilty of something. And I think if these prosecutors had conscientiously in this office looked at the Ian Freeman case and said, you know, what we've done here with Pulaski is horrendous. I mean, this is horrendous here. This is entrapment, fraud, dirty stuff. They would not have gone after him on anything. The registration charge, the income tax, the conspiracy, absolutely ludicrous. Okay, we're past time. Sorry. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Good to be back with you.